The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And this past Sunday, we had the privilege of having our District Superintendent, Dr. Eddie Estep, to be our host as he was speaking to us on his message about giving over to God and listening to that voice. I certainly got a lot of it out personally, and I've already heard a lot of feedback from that. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go to shepnaz.org/media, and you can find his message there and see it in totality. And there's also some resources there. We have a 5-day devotional, a group leader guide, and also a parent guide that you can go through with that. But we're going to welcome in now, if you would welcome Pastor Rob and Dr. Eddie Estep. Welcome in.
Thank you. Yay, Dr. Eddie. Well, this is Dr. Eddie Estep, and he's my boss. He's the man. But what's really interesting about this, my last two bosses actually were pastors at the very same church that I happen to work at. So that's been kind of cool that there's a special connection for our church to the district and leadership there. I'll let him share a little bit. Pastor Tim worked with Eddie a long time ago back in Kentucky. Well, I don't mean to say a long time ago, but a while back in Kentucky. And he shared a lot of good stuff yesterday. But I'll have you, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give us your pastoral history, where you've been and what you've been doing and all that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Rob. First of all, let me thank you, Joe, and Pastor Rob. Thank you for the privilege of being on the podcast and of having the opportunity to engage in this way. I'm grateful. And I don't want to be your boss, Rob. I want to be your friend, and I don't mind being your pastor. I'd love to be your pastor. I'm not sure I want to be your boss. So. All
right, we'll go with that. I can live with that. That's great. Thank you.
So I'm Eddie. Grew up in West Virginia, sleepy little river town called Paden City. Great local church. Had a significant impact on my life. The men and women of that church and pastors of that church were just tremendous and great role models, and just invested in me in significant ways, and I'm grateful. When I was 15 years old, I went to a summer youth camp, and God called me to preach. I was not thinking about pastoring or being a preacher. Wasn't on my radar. Nobody in my family had ever been a preacher. But the Thursday night of that summer youth camp, in response to an invitation, I went to an altar to pray, and it became obvious to me when I went to the altar that that's what God's plan was for my life. So that set a direction that was very helpful. I went to Mount Vernon Nazarene University, fell in love with a girl back home. I met my home church, Diane, and we got married after I graduated from college. Actually, Diane's 5 years younger than me, so I had to wait a year for her to graduate from high school. Before we got married. And 6 weeks after we got married, we loaded up everything we had in a very small U-Haul and headed to Kansas City, and I attended seminary there. Diane worked and put me through school. After 3 years of seminary, began a pastoral journey. Pastored in Ripley, West Virginia for 4 years. Great church to begin ministry. Wonderful lay people in that church. Then we moved to Maysville, Kentucky. Larger community, larger church. We were there for 10 years. And then was called the pastor shepherd. And I followed two significantly long-term pastors. E.K. Ritchie, who was there for 39 years, maybe something like that. And then Smith, who was there for 16 years. So I was a short timer. I served shepherd for 6 years, but what a wonderful place to serve, and such warm memories. Yesterday was personally just almost emotionally overwhelming to see so many people that I had the privilege to walk with and minister to and serve during those years. It was wonderful, just fantastic. After during my 6th year at Shepherd, I was appointed District Superintendent in South Carolina, and served in South Carolina for 12 years. wonderful place to serve. I think every Nazarene pastor should have an assignment in South Carolina. Some in their just a wonderful culture and climate and wonderful people, great food. So it is a good place to serve. And then I was appointed to serve as district superintendent in Kansas City. And we were there for almost 7 years. Another wonderful place to serve. Kansas City District is an unusual district. It's almost an anomaly when it comes to Nazarene districts, in that there's such an institutional presence in Kansas City. You've got the Nazarene University, Nazarene Seminary, Nazarene Publishing House, the Global Ministry Center. So I used to tell people you can't sling a cat in Kansas City without hitting a Nazarene preacher. They're everywhere. But it was a wonderful place to serve. And I think my leadership style was significantly, my paradigm significantly expanded during my service there. I became very much more aware of multicultural ministry and the ability to serve various contexts and various cultures. Church planting became very important to me during that season, and it was wonderful. And then about 4 months ago, Dr. Philly Shambo, the general superintendent in jurisdiction here in South Central Ohio, called and wanted to know if I'd be willing to pray about him appointing me as superintendent here. And we were. I'll tell you, he gave us 2 weeks to pray about it, and that was probably wisdom on his part, because we loved Kansas City. It was fulfilling to minister there. But as we prayed about it, this opportunity really grew on us. Actually, it grew on me. As soon as Diane heard it, she wanted to come because our kids are here and our grandkids are here. So she was gung-ho from the very beginning. It took a few days for me, but it really grew on me, the opportunity to serve, and I began to dream and think about what God might accomplish here and the opportunity to serve wonderful people, a lot of whom I know here in South Central Ohio. So we started October 1 and are very much enjoying being here.
Great. I think one of the things that there are probably several people who are listening who know what a district superintendent is and does. There are probably some people who may be saying, what is and what does a district superintendent do? So if you figured that out yet, can you tell us what it is you do?
Well, in our polity, we have local churches and districts, and then a global church or a general church. The local church is where the action is. Churches like Shepherd, that's where things, significant missional events and experiences take place in the local church. So I think the local church is most important. But the district is a collection of local churches. So our district, the South Central Ohio District, has about 70 congregations that I serve. And a district is defined, it's a defined geographical area, and all the Nazarene churches in that area compose the district. So we have 70 churches. Just in a meeting an hour ago, I was asking about how many languages are spoken in our churches here in South Central Ohio. We want to become a multicultural district, and I learned that there are 8 languages right being spoken on the district. So that's wonderful. My passion is starting churches, strengthening churches, and developing leaders. But I have jurisdictional responsibility over the pastors that would be on this district, the ministers, not just pastors, staff pastors. They could be educators, they could be chaplains. If they're Nazarene clergy, I have responsibility for them, and I serve churches that are in pastoral transition. I work with churches to help them find pastors and call pastors. I do a good deal of troubleshooting and putting out fires, not a great deal, but enough. And then I work with teams. I work with several teams on the district to forward the mission that God has given us.
Well, it sounds like you have it very clearly defined. That's good. And I think you also, when a new district superintendent is appointed or elected, you also train them, don't you?
I do. I've had the privilege for about 11 years now of every superintendent that's elected or appointed in the United States and Canada. I spend a day with them, training them. And so there are 78 district superintendents in the USA and Canada, and I've had the privilege of working with almost all of them.
Wow.
I have a friend who says that being a district superintendent is a little bit like being a cemetery groundskeeper. There's a lot of people, but none of them are really listening to you. So there's a little bit of that in play.
That's good. That's very good. Good. Well, one of the things that I have a couple of side stories that I want to get to, but one of the things that you were at our church yesterday preaching is because we did a pastoral review or a church review, and wonder if you could just talk about that just a little bit, the whole process and what we do and why we do that.
Yeah. So in our polity, our manual, Church of the Nazarene manual, calls for what's called a church pastoral relationship review. And it happens 2 years after a pastor arrives at a church, and then every 4 years after that. And it's an opportunity for the pastor and the district superintendent and the local leaders of the church, the lay leaders, the church board, to sit down together and just to evaluate, how's this relationship going? What are areas that we can work on? What is there to celebrate about this relationship? It's one of the best ways that a district superintendent can get to know the pastors that serve with the superintendent, and also get to know the church boards or the local church leaders. Sometimes I view it as, you buy a new car and you drive it for a while, and you take it in to check the alignment. If you just take it in regularly for servicing, sometimes they'll ask you if you want your car, you want your car to be checked, the alignment to be checked. And sometimes there's just been a little bit of a wobble, a little bit of something that needs tweaked a little bit, and this ride would be a lot more comfortable. And a lot of times the review serves that purpose, that it just identifies, hey, there's a little something here that needs to be tweaked for this relationship to be all that God means for it to be, and all that we want it to be. In your case, you had an excellent review, and there wasn't so much alignment that was needed as it was a celebration of, wow, this is a great relationship. So 10 years at Shepherd. Shepherd's got a history of long tenures, which says a lot about Shepherd. It really does. Shepherd. And the fact that you've been there 10 years says a lot about you. I don't know what the percentage is of Nazarene pastors that serve a congregation for 10 years, but it's not high. I think the last time I saw the average tenure of a pastor at a church was like 4.5 years was the average tenure. So it was an opportunity for the church board and you and me to celebrate all that God's doing at Shepherd.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very good testimony to the people that are here. They're great people. I love being the pastor here, and they put up with a lot, so I'm thankful for that.
I was just going to jump in, kind of talking about some celebrations. We are going to be coming up in the next couple of years on 100 years celebrating, and I have been down through the hallways, down through the FLC, and I was wondering if this might be an event you remember, but for those that walk the halls here at the Gahanna campus, there's a picture back there that is a huge, looks like tent meeting. And I wonder if that might have been the time period when you were around, because I see a lot of faces that if in my mind's eye, I make them about 20, 25 years younger, it's people that I think, hey, that would have been about the right time period. Do you remember that event at all?
I do. I actually believe that might have been the 75th anniversary at Shepherd. And I remember the tent. I think maybe Bill Prince was the general superintendent in jurisdiction at that time. He'd been president of Mount Vernon, and we invited him to come and preach that weekend. We had the big tent out there on the parking lot. Again, this has been 23 years ago, so my memory's a little fuzzy. Actually, the biggest memory I have about that weekend was that I got tased. We had the Gahanna police were there. I don't know if they had an exhibit it was a big community event on the grounds there. And the police were there, and they were talking about how sometimes they do a demonstration of somebody getting tased, and wanted to know if maybe the pastor would like to volunteer to do that. I remember how nervous. And I actually asked them a couple questions, but I wanted to make sure that this was something that wouldn't completely embarrass me, but they assured me I'd be fine. So I got tased. I think they called it riding the bull or something like that. Of a big
Pastor,
75th anniversary of all things, you would think I'd remember more important things than that.
I think I'd remember getting tased. I think I'd remember that for sure also.
Well, Pastor Rob has been asking for some suggestions. He's like, it's only a couple years out. Let's be thinking of some things that we can do. So definitely that's something we can put on the list. That's a tradition that shouldn't continue at the church. There's some things that are good, some are not. That's not one. So, speaking of this is, you might recall this as well. I've heard a couple of stories when you were pastor here. One time, like we have groundhogs out in the yard oftentimes, and I believe I heard a story about you catching a groundhog and bringing it in and putting it in the youth pastor's trash can while it was still alive.
Well, I'm sorry to say that is not an urban myth. That's reality. So I grew up in West Virginia, and you can take the boy out of the hills, but you can't take the hills out of the boy. And so I've just all my life had this ability to sneak up on groundhogs and catch them, and possums and catch them. And there was, I don't know if it's still there now, but there was a chestnut tree there by the fence house, and groundhogs would come and eat those chestnuts. And I think I was working on a sermon one day at my desk there and looked out and saw a groundhog, and I thought, I wonder if I've still got it. I wonder if I'm still able to do it. And so then when I caught it, it's like, well, what do I do with it now?
What do you do with it?
And I thought, well, the youth pastor will probably appreciate this. I found out later he didn't, but he might. Yeah, I put it in his trash can, and when he came in, he discovered it. Yeah,
that's great. We might need to call you because we have families. We trap them and take them away, and I've tried a few things here and there, but they're pretty resilient. They must like the tree because it's still here. That's great.
Well, we appreciate kind of the recollection of some of the memories. We want to give you a chance, if there's some things as we're looking forward for the district, maybe some of the things that you're looking forward to or some opportunities that are coming up that you might want to share.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that opportunity. A couple of things I would say that I want to be sure and say before we're done is yesterday when I was at Shepherd, I saw so many people that I knew 20 years ago, which is it's a great testimony to them and their faithfulness and stability, but it's also a great testimony to Shepherd, to a church that ministers and has a mission that people are willing to give their lives to. And that's what I saw. And then the back prayer room, there was something on the wall back there that paid tribute. It was a memorial plaque or something that paid tribute to people who had passed. And I looked over those names, many of whom I knew and I remembered, who had over the years been a significant blessing to Shepherd and to me and to other pastors who had served. Mm-hmm. And I just thought how rich the legacy of this church. And then, so many younger couples that I'd never met before that are a part of the church now, just as an indication that the life of the church remains vibrant. And it was wonderful. I loved it. I loved what's happening with the Johnstown campus. I've actually heard about that before I became district superintendent, and I'm looking forward to learning more and to experiencing worship there. But I'm very encouraged by that. And one of the reasons why is that a church like Shepherd has, coming up on your 100th anniversary, which is fantastic. They talk about the life cycles of churches, and Shepherd over the years has been able to recreate itself, reimagine ministry. It's not gotten stuck in a rut and become irrelevant, but it's been able to stay fresh in ministry and in serving the community. So I look at a church like this, and it has a DNA that I think needs to be replicated. We don't need fewer churches. We need more churches, and churches that are alive and vibrant and missional. We want to see the churches like that replicated. So I think what's happening in Johnstown is an indication of that and an opportunity for that. But I hope it won't be limited to Johnstown. I hope the Lord will open up other opportunities for Shepherd's influence to expand, whether it be a parent-affiliated congregation like Johnstown is, or rather it becomes its own independent Church of the Nazarene. Whatever, the DNA of Shepherd is a DNA that would be a blessing that could continue to be replicated in other places. I also would want to point people to some things that are coming up in the next few months, district-wide, that are opportunities to resource pastors and lay leaders in churches. So we've got an event coming up in February the 22nd, called Equip. It's going to be a new event for us, but it's going to be led by our discipleship ministry of the district, and it'll be a day of it's a Saturday that will be spent resourcing lay leaders, teachers, small group leaders. Basically, any leader in the church would benefit from attending something like this. Then we have our annual district assembly. Actually, I'm just coming out of a planning meeting for district assembly that will be held April 27th and 28th. It's a Sunday night, which will be our ordination service. 16 ordination candidates here, which is great. And then district assembly that will be held on Monday morning and afternoon. That takes place at the Naz in Grove City. And then our annual camp meeting at Hocking Hills Retreat Center will come up in July. I think it's the first full week of July. I'm looking forward to experiencing that. We're going to have two preachers that week. J.K. Warwick, that I know preached a revival at Shepherd. And then Eddie is the other preacher. I'll be joining J.K. in those preaching opportunities. So we'll be alternating every other night that week, preaching at Logan. And I would sure invite folks to come down and be a part of that.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking your time. I know you got a lot of things, and you've been to meetings already, and you're getting ready to go to another one. So thanks for squeezing us in. We do appreciate it very much. And thank you for being here yesterday. And thank you for your leadership here at the church. It's a blessing to follow men like you and Sam and to serve alongside you with the great people here at this church. So thank you for that opportunity. Thanks again for joining with us.
Thank you, Pastor Rob. My privilege. And thank you, Joe.
Yep. Love to have you. And if you've been interested, as I said before, you can go to shepnaz.org/media, and you can check out the message that Dr. Estep delivered this past Sunday. Also, you can go to sconaz.org if you want to see what's going on at the district. And when you get done there, you can go to shepnaz.org to see everything that's going on with the church. We also encourage you to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Keep track of everything that's going on. Comment, like, subscribe, all those things. For Pastor Rob and Dr. Estep, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.